Welcome to MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims, one Texan at a time.
Hello and welcome back to MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims, one Texan at a time with Miguel Garza. Miguel is the founder of the MF Garza Law Firm, where he fights for Texans injured in accidents ranging from car and truck crashes to catastrophic injuries. I am your host, Kevin Rosenquist. Today we're joined by a special guest, Miguel's wife, attorney Eliana Marudi, founder of Marudi Law Group. Eliana is an immigration attorney with a lifelong commitment to helping immigrant families navigate some of the toughest challenges they face. Together, Miguel and Eliana will be talking about what it means to be injured in Texas without legal status, the rights immigrants still have, and how families can protect themselves. Miguel, Eliana, welcome.
Thank you.
Very good to see you again.
So Eliana, I'll start with you since you're the guest. Many undocumented Texans worry, and rightfully so, that if they're injured, that they have no rights. Can you start by explaining what protections the law gives them after an accident?
Yes. So immigrants also have equal protection clause rights under the Constitution. So that means that they are also entitled to the same rights as any other American that's injured in a car accident to bring a claim or to go through the process to report an incident, et cetera. So they have the same rights as any other American.
Something that a lot of people, I think, in this country don't realize.
In fact, there's a lot of muddied waters and concepts with immigration law because it is federal and a lot of other issues.
Miguel, from your perspective as a personal injury attorney, what's the first thing that you would recommend someone without legal status does if they've been hurt in a crash or on the job for that matter?
Well, one of the benefits of having an immigration attorney as a wife is that I get to ask her all these questions as well, and obviously so myself. But everyone, despite your legal status, has the exact same rights as Eliana was saying to pursue a claim against the at fault or negligent party. Regardless of their legal status, no one could be denied medical care because of that. So despite whether you're a citizen or you're not a citizen, if you need medical treatment and you are admitted to a hospital or some type of clinic, you're going to get the same type of treatment and rights as everybody else, even if you're a citizen or not. And typically what I always try to tell them is that, regardless of your status, if you're severely injured or even minorly injured, then you need to go seek medical attention in a timely fashion, usually within 24 to 48 hours of the wreck. But you have the same rights as anybody else in this country while you pursue getting your residency or citizenship in the United States.
Another thing I think people don't understand, I think this might be a podcast of things that a lot of the rhetoric out there and social media posts are misinformed about.
Yeah, with the current political climate right now, there's a lot of misunderstandings or misconceptions about these things. So hopefully we can kind of clear the air a little bit today.
Mm-hmm. For many immigrants, just reaching out for help can feel risky. Eliana, what are the concerns you hear from families who are in that situation?
Well, obviously for immigrants, if they are undocumented, the primary concern is going to be deportation, fear of being detained and placed in the deportation court proceedings so that eventually, they have to go through a court battle to see if they're going to be deported or not even afforded that right. Right now, we're seeing a lot of violations of due process in the immigration field. So the primary concern for people who are undocumented is that even for those actually who are documented, who have a legal status or have a legal work permit, they are concerned with, being accused of causing or being, culpable in any way, or just being blamed, even if they weren't culpable of of anything. In this case, a car accident. So there are concerns that their legal status or their permit would be affected. So those are the main concerns.
Yeah, I can understand. I can understand that even if you're here legally and you have documentation and all that you still have some worries, given, again, as we alluded to, the current political climate. Can filing a personal injury claim put someone at risk with immigration authorities?
Well, it perhaps. The answer to a lot of questions is perhaps. If they're if there's any component to a criminal action, like the accident involves drinking and driving or something related to criminal law, then there can be criminal and therefore immigration consequences. But just your typical 18-wheeler car accident, or somebody who is involved in a car accident and they're the victim of a negligent driver, there isn't any reason to believe that they would be placed in any immigration risks.
And Kevin, if I could just add on to that a little bit. So, generally speaking, exactly what Eliana, like perhaps, it kind of depends, but generally speaking, no, in my opinion. When it comes to filing a claim, you're dealing with an insurance carrier or the company that's responsible for the injury. Legal authorities or law enforcement generally are not involved in the claims or litigation process. Now, in recent years, like I said, with the current political state that we're in, if you potentially have a hearing or have to go to the courthouse or something like that, it's been known that ICE agents may show up to the courthouse if they know that you have some type of legal proceeding. Now, generally that happens more in immigration courts. It's been happening more often, recently. Before that wasn't really a big issue. But when it comes to civil litigation in a car or trucking accident or on-the-job injury, usually you're in the civil courthouse, not the immigration courthouse, so to speak, because one's federal and one's state. So typically in a civil proceeding, like when I typically handle them, that doesn't usually happen. ICE agents won't go over there, but it has happened in the past, but usually it doesn't at the civil courthouse.
And I'll chime in, actually, this is a good time to remind people that actually immigration offenses like coming here undocumented is actually a civil offense. It's not a criminal offense. So we are talking about civil matters, both for immigration. Now, again, we go into a rabbit hole of different issues that make cases complicated, but generally immigration matters are civil, and car accidents are obviously civil. So I echo what Miguel said.
Good clarification. Thank you for that. That's good to know. Miguel, how do you approach building a case when your client may not have traditional documentation, pay stubs, insurance, or things like that the courts generally expect?
Usually I approach it the same way as I would approach any other case, like if somebody was a citizen or if they're not. It's really, like I said, it's not a criminal offense to come into the United States again. And also things like insurance, as you mentioned, typically insurance isn't admissible at trial. So that's not something that would usually affect a case. Now, if there's a lost wage claim, perhaps that is a bit different. Now, one big misconception is that some people believe that undocumented individuals do not pay taxes. That's incorrect. If they have a legitimate employer that follows the tax and reporting laws required by them, then the employer takes out the employee's taxes before paying them, because they're required under federal law to do that. Now, of course, perhaps if the employer may just be a little shady, or some type of contractor that may be paying them cash under the table or not reporting it to the government, then obviously that can raise problems. So that's typically on the employer, not necessarily the employee, who may or may not be undocumented. But it can create problems when you obviously want to prove up a lost wage claim to a jury, and they ask, has this person paid taxes? And if they haven't, obviously that's not going to be good, and you don't want to present that to a jury. But typically, if they have a legitimate employer, then the taxes are paid for ahead of time before they actually get their income.
Okay, yeah, because you're right. That is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that a lot of times they do pay taxes, like you said. Not every time, but who among us hasn't been paid under the table every once in a while? Come on.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to clarify. Actually, a lot of immigrants, data shows that anywhere between like 60 billion to even 100 billion, depending on the year, is what immigrants pay into in taxes. That is because immigrants pay their taxes through what we call an ITIN. And individual taxpayer identification number. So the IRS gives them a number to file taxes because the IRS doesn't care whether you have status or not. They
Right.
want to get paid.
They want their money.
They give them a number under which to file taxes, which is separate from, it's similar to social, but it's a little different. And so they do pay taxes. And so they are paid, the employer is obligated to comply with the payment of taxes. So that's another misconception in the immigration world.
Yeah, Eliana, how do cultural and language barriers affect whether immigrants feel safe enough to reach out for legal help after being injured?
Well, mainly there is a fear, that some immigrants have due to being misunderstood or misinterpreted, or feeling like they won't be understood, or that automatically they're going to be negatively affected because of their status. So I would say that mistrust and fear is one of the ways. And then obviously some people will have a language barrier for working with a process, a personal injury process, whether that's with insurance companies, attorneys, etc. With an attorney, obviously you would have somebody who can help you manage and work with somebody who speaks your language, but usually those tend to be some of the cultural or language barriers that immigrants encounter.
Miguel, do you have any stories or examples where you represented an undocumented client and helped them pursue justice despite their fears?
Multiple, actually. I've had, I don't always ask if somebody is undocumented or not, because really you're trying to focus on helping them at that point. Everybody has, the need for medical attention, and they can get that if they need to, despite their legal status. So, I always try to help them regardless of whether or not they are a citizen or undocumented. Maybe they're in the process of getting that done. Maybe they're here on a visa. Perhaps they overstayed on their visa, but because of their wreck and they couldn't go back home in time. So there's several reasons why the case could be affected. However, in most situations, I'm always able to get some type of compensation for them. And what's very, very satisfying for me is that, when helping them get compensation and helping them get justice will eventually help them and their family. So I've had clients that, came in here through the proper channels. I've had some troubles, obviously, with immigration for whatever reason. And then I was able to get them some compensation as a result of their injuries. And then not only were they able to get legal status and residency or another visa, but their families were able to too, and really just try to help them pursue the American dream, just try to get them justice. And, really it's a pretty satisfying part of the job, and I'm glad we're able to help people out despite their legal status, because, everybody needs help regardless of what your situation may be.
Miguel, you and I have talked before about what people should do right after an accident. Take pictures, get exchange information, call the police, all this stuff. When it comes to an undocumented family, should they do anything different after an accident to protect both their health and their legal rights?
That's tough to say. Eliana might know a little bit more about this particular topic, but what generally, it's the same thing as if you're a citizen. You got to go and obviously get the medical treatment. You need to comply with your doctor's orders and do what's required. If you're in an accident and the police show up, you obviously need to comply with what the police need. Now, in that situation, the police typically are not investigating whether or not you're a citizen or undocumented. They are trying to help you out because you're injured or trying to clear the scene. It's not something where they typically call ICE and say, hey, well, I don't have an ID for you. It could just be somebody that may not have a driver's license, but they're a citizen, but they just may not have it on them. So, police don't necessarily look for that if they are investigating if they're investigating a wreck, but they absolutely need to comply with the investigating agency and obviously make sure that they're getting the medical treatment that they need, and don't be afraid to go see a medical provider, because they are entitled to go get any type of medical treatment they feel is necessary despite what their legal status is.
Eliana, anything to add on that?
Yes, I recommend, people should, you're obviously going to have to give them your name and your contact information, driver's license if you have one, insurance if your information if you have insurance. But they are not obligated to, and in fact, I advise against answering questions related to where you were born and whether you have status, because ultimately that could affect them. And ultimately, that is, they have a right to not answer that question because it could be used against them. That has to do with the fact that right now, with the politics, I mean, inevitably, right now, immigration is very politicized, and so with Texas, and it depends on the state's involvement and how they're working with the federal government. Every state and really every city is going to have a different relationship or attitude about working with federal law enforcement. And so you shouldn't answer questions related to your status or where you were born, because they could use it. It could be used against you, but everything else you should supply. And then obviously call an immigration attorney if you do need help with navigating any detention issues.
Also, if we go to trial or I have one of my clients testify and they happen to be undocumented, they are not going to answer those type of questions. If we go to trial, the defense attorney, whoever's cross-examining my client, cannot ask them about their legal status because it's inadmissible at trial. Or it can be you filed what's called a motion in limine, and that prevents that type of information from being disclosed to the jury because could potentially prejudice the jury in this case, or prejudice my client, and have them, not render a fair verdict. So those type of information, or whether or not legal status or is been fulfilled or not, is not admissible at trial. So just wanted to add that.
And that's because ultimately status is not relevant to what caused the accident or to the cause of it.
Finally, what reassurance would you guys give to undocumented Texans listening right now who might feel powerless or just flat out scared after an accident?
Yes, to give you a call because you can help. Immigrants should exercise their constitutional rights, and they should pursue claims that they have a right to pursue, and they should be compensated for any wrongdoing. And just because they don't have legal status, or they have a different status, there's different statuses. You can have a student visa and you're not a resident, or you can be a resident, or you can be a citizen, or you can be in the middle of. But your status should not discourage you or should not hold you back from actually pursuing the legal mechanisms that you have to be compensated for an injury that wasn't your fault. So they should pursue it, and they should contact a trusted attorney that will help them navigate the process successfully.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if you ever have any type of legal issue, you should always consult with an attorney. Don't rely on ChatGPT. Don't rely on Google. Don't rely on those types of things because that's not reliable information. You should always consult with somebody that is not necessarily an expert, but specializes in a particular field like immigration or personal injury. Because the other great thing about that is that, while I can certainly help with the personal injury side, but, if they have immigration questions and they're concerned about that for them or their families, I can always refer them to another attorney, like my wife, Eliana, and have her potentially, or have them schedule an appointment with her to answer any other questions that they may have about the immigration process while I help out on the personal injury or civil litigation side of things. So always consult with an attorney. If one attorney can't necessarily help you out with that specific issue, I'm sure they can refer you to somebody that can.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. And thank you for joining us today on MF Garza Law Firm, helping injured victims one Texan at a time, with Miguel Garza and, of course, our special guest, immigration attorney Eliana Marudi. If you or someone you love has been injured in Texas and you're worried about your legal status, you still have rights and you don't have to face it alone. Visit mfgarzalaw.com to connect with Miguel, or marudalaw.com to reach Eliana. And be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with anyone you think could use this information. Miguel, Eliana, thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Kevin. Thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.